Hello again. This is Namrata Notani from the Law Office of Namrata S. Notani, PLLC, and I'm here to answer some more questions regarding trust, wills, estate planning, life, and legacy planning, as I like to call it. And today we are going to talk about asset protection. The reason I have asset protection so low down in my playlist and much later in my video series is because once you have your basic estate plan in place, once you actually have the basic questions answered as to whether your family is protected, whether your minor children have temporary guardians appointed, whether your spouse is in a good position with designated beneficiaries, whether you have a plan for giving powers of attorney if you're incapacitated or sick and can't make decisions for yourself. These are basic things that you need to make sure are set up, right? You need to have a plan that shows where your assets are, how you want to distribute them, and a particular design in your trust that allows you to either distribute those assets in different ages and stages or as a lifetime access or maybe a hybrid of that. But either ways, you kind of have this plan and you know that if something happens to you today, your family is pretty much well taken care of. Now, let's talk about the next step for people who have more than just that. If they don't just care about, passing on their wealth, but they also care about protecting their wealth right at this time and making sure that our main basic predators, as we call it, our main, our creditors, anything when we are filing for bankruptcy, anytime there is a divorce and you have ex-spouses involved, anytime there are lawsuits, which is one of the most common things that people want to protect themselves from because lawsuits are so very common in this country. And so those are the different aspects, risks that can attack and reduce your assets. And it is really important that you protect those assets. And I just want to tell you, although this is not legal, it has nothing to do with law. It has to do with the first line of defense when it comes to asset protection. So before I start off by telling you the different techniques and ways of protecting, say, your rental property or your business or any entity or anything like that, the most basic way and the probably the least complicated way of protecting those assets is through insurance. And you need to understand that insurance plays a huge role in protecting yourself and your assets and giving you that cash flow that your family might need immediately after a demise, right? Because ultimately, what are you trying to do when you leave your family? If something happens to me today, there's certain things that I need to look at. Do I have debts that need to be repaid? Because my loved ones will be left with paying those debts. Is there income that I'm getting in that they are dependent on? And I need to make sure that that income gets replaced. If I have a house, which most of us have, at that point, if I have a mortgage, there could be a huge mortgage that now I'm going to leave behind for my loved ones to pay if they want to stay in that house, right? So these are the things that I want to make sure I can take care of almost right away, right? I want to make sure that my kids can, or my spouse can pay off my debts, can replace my income, can pay off my mortgage, can take care of me, right? If I'm sick or incapacitated. And where is that money going to come from? Most of the time, that money comes from insurance. Either, if it's long-term care insurance, it could be disability insurance if I'm sick, it could be life insurance if I die. And that is one of the easiest ways that you can replace, I guess, what is coming from an individual when it comes to income. Also, there's other kinds of insurance, right? Your business insurance, your malpractice insurance, your auto insurance, home insurance. These are all important as well. Insurance against cybersecurity. If you're in a situation or in a place where, any kind of data breach can cause issues with your customers or clients, right? There's so many different insurances that go into protecting everything you have in your assets. And this is your first line of defense. So pay attention to it. You want to make sure that you do have these present in and working, and that you actually have your policies in one place, that you have somebody review these policies. A lot of people do not consider that these policies need to be reviewed by attorneys, but they should, because every insurance has provisions for when it doesn't apply. And a lot of people don't realize, even though insurance is the line of first defense, there are times when it doesn't cover everything, right? And that's when you need a backup plan. So there's also insurance coverage that obviously is not going to cover a limitless amount of money. So whenever you buy insurance, you consider, okay, this is the risk, this is how much I'm willing to pay for it, this is how much it's going to pay me in the end. So there are always times when obviously an insurance is not going to cover the entire amount that you may have due. So this is when you need to also consider asset protection in other ways. So now that we're done with the insurance aspect of it and the protection, let's talk about how we're going to protect something legally. Now, if you have your homestead, your house, as I've already mentioned to you before, your homestead is your best protection. So you don't want to lose that. Now you have other properties like rental properties. A lot of people have rental properties under their individual names. That is not a good idea. They also have maybe just undeveloped land under their individual names. And that is not a great idea either. A lot of times people say, well, with rental properties, you can have a tenant that sues you. And I understand why maybe a rental property needs to be put under an entity like an LLC. So when you have an LLC, you have limited liability, because that's what an LLC stands for, a limited liability company. At that point, your liability is restricted to your business, to your LLC, whatever you're getting out of that LLC. Just remember, when you form those LLCs and when you transfer those properties into those LLCs, first of all, transferring property into an LLC requires the lender's consent if there's still a mortgage in it. That's really important for you to know and for you to make sure of when you do that. And the second thing that's really important is that those LLCs should ideally be single entity LLCs. They should just have one rental property within them. And the third thing that you must understand is that the LLC alone doesn't create or cause a protection. The LLC requires an operating or company agreement. That is the agreement between you, even as a single member, and the LLC. And if you're multiple members, it's even more important, because then that becomes a partnership. You want to make sure that your LLC gives you the protection that you require by your operating or company agreement, because it should have contractually what a debtor or what a creditor or what a lawsuit even can get out of your LLC. That company agreement is important in protecting the entity and what is held within that LLC. So please do remember that just forming that LLC is not enough. More than that, you need to make sure that every LLC has its own EIN with its own bank account, and that you don't mingle your personal account and money and expenses with your business account and money and expenses, because as soon as you mingle them, you are losing that protection. It's no longer an LLC separation from your individual entity, individual assets, because you just pierced what they say the corporate veil, except that it's not a corporate, it's an LLC, but it's got a similar concept. It's basically some kind of a breach between or kind of a mingling between your personal and business. And when that happens, the person who sues you, if they're able to show that you're pretty much using that LLC as a personal entity, with just using the money for whatever you wanted personally, then they can come after your personal assets. And that's important to know, and important to keep that separation between your business and your personal expenses and assets. So as I mentioned, you want your rental properties under an LLC. You also want your land under an LLC. Even though there is no tenant there to sue you, land often is unfenced, especially if it is in the outskirts. And if you have any kind of situation where somebody trespasses into the land, and if there are any kind of what we call nuisances, but any kind of risks, any barbed wires or any kind of a pit or anything, that even tree stumps, something that somebody could trip over, fall, injure themselves, they can still sue you, because you left that land open and even though they were trespassers, they can actually still sue you given the situation. So you want to make sure that you have insurance for the land as well, that you also try to either fence it or keep it where there are no trespassers, and you try to, if you can possibly, have that land under an entity as well. So that is for your real estate and land. The other aspect of asset protection is to do with any other accounts that you have, or any other businesses. So there are many ways of creating irrevocable trusts. Sometimes you can create them within the country, the self-settled. There are trusts that you can create in states like South Dakota. There's also trusts that you can create outside the country, where the trust is outside the jurisdiction of this country. And so anybody who sues you can never get the assets within that trust, because that trust is governed by a foreign jurisdiction in a foreign country. And there is no way that anybody can reach that. So there are many different ways of protecting your assets, your entities, your businesses, based on what you have, how much you want to protect, how much flexibility you want, how much access you want on a day-to-day basis with these assets. One more thing that I would probably want to touch a little bit about are getting more common these days, and that's the IRA LLCs. So a lot of times people have IRA accounts and they have a lot of money in them and they want to diversify, especially in these situations where there's, like right now, the market's not doing that great. So a lot of stocks are going down. People want to diversify on their IRAs, and IRAs technically and generally historically have only held stocks and bonds. And so there are people who would actually want to maybe buy property, real estate with that IRA, or something else, cryptocurrency. I mean, you name it, something different than just the general stocks. And the one way of doing that is by actually creating an IRA LLC, and then having that IRA LLC buy those different assets like a house. So just something to consider, because that actually gives you a double protection, because an LLC and an IRA, and it helps you diversify your portfolio. Of course, you want to do these not just with an attorney, but also with a CPA, so that you have a good knowledge of the taxes involved. You also probably want to talk with a financial advisor to make sure that you have a diverse enough portfolio where you want to do something like that. But it's definitely something to think about when you've reached that point where you're like, I have a lot in my IRA and I maybe want to do something else with it. Because after all, your IRA is eventually going to, when you take it out, be taxed at the time that you're taking it out. If it's a huge amount of money, and you have a certain amount of life expectancy at that time, you're like, maybe I want to do something else with it, something different with it. So anyways, that is all I have for you today. There are many other ways, like I had mentioned, of protecting your assets. There's ways you can make your trust be one of the members of your LLC. You can, like I said, have trust outside the state, like South Dakota. You can have international trust in places like Cook Island and Mauritius and Seychelles. They are very common places where people have international trusts. If you want to get more knowledge or information about any of this, I'm happy to talk to you again. My website is notanilaw.com, and you can book a call with me right from my website. There is a link right up there. If you have any questions whatsoever, you can always go to resources, and under resources in my tab, you'll find there are places where you can register for webinars. All of my series of my YouTube videos should be there, so you can listen to anything by topic. You can always, like I said, give me a call or email me, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions that way as well. Have a great day and happy planning.